for the mining sector confuses me, but I believe this reference pertains to my involvement to developing a multi-user gateway to the third-party amendment of ArcelorMittal's current concession and through granting real access to HPX High Power Explorations Incorporated, an American company owned by American billionaire Robert Friedland, looking to transport rail from Guinea through Liberia through the port of Buchanan. I say so because about a year ago in Washington, D.C., I received a hint that persons connected with the American company HPX were trying to get me on Treasury sanctions because I was allegedly and supposedly, quote, favoring ArcelorMittal Limited over HPX and preventing HPX from accessing the rail to conduct its investment in Guinea through Liberia, unquote. My informant knew this was unjust and unfair. Knowing the role I was playing on the Interministerial Concessions Committee and understanding the difficulties and complexities of the negotiation, I was also informed that persons close to HPX were considering sanctions against me because the company had paid $37 million to the government of Liberia through the national budget since 2019 and was yet to have an agreement with the government. Legitimate monies received by the government of Liberia for the development of Liberia through the national budget is never a bribe. That an agreement has been difficult to reach because surrounding a pre-existing agreement is no reason to threaten government officials with sanctions. I'm providing these explanations and context because there are these are the charters that have underpinned threats of sanction against me and my family from powerful individuals. It is important for the public to understand and know these things. We have not discussed them publicly as a government, but now we have to discuss them under the current circumstances. I was advised that to avoid sanction, I should withdraw my support for ArcelorMittal Third Amendment until after the election. It was on that basis that I advised the President, Dr. George Weah, to turn over negotiations on the rail to the United States government, since too much propaganda and misinformation were threatening to destroy members of his cabinet. The President obliged, and the Americans for a brief moment tried to bring both HPX and ArcelorMittal together to reach some understanding on the multi-user rail system. Meetings were held in London and Washington. Unfortunately, these meetings did not achieve anything, and the Americans withdrew and turned negotiations back to the government of Liberia. The truth of the matter is that ArcelorMittal has an agreement with the government of Liberia signed by the United Party government that gives Mittal the right to use the Nimba rail to be the operator of this rail. In the government's vision to develop a multi-rail system, we have tried to have ArcelorMittal relinquish operatorship of the rail to an independent third-party rail operator for purposes of fairness and equity. Mittal has not been open to this position, and we have been at a deadlock for more than 3 years. Realizing the impossibility of having Mittal give up rail operatorship, and knowing the government was not willing to proceed to international arbitration, which is international dispute adjudication or court, and knowing the government was also not willing to proceed to international arbitration, government moved to a position of having Mittal become the user operator in exchange for other critical rights Mittal would have to give up under its current concession that would enable fair and equitable access to third parties such as HPX. That would have enabled us to reach a compromise. Unfortunately, HPX does not seem open to such a compromise and has insisted that Mittal abandons the rail operatorship. Mittal itself does not want to give up the rail operatorship. As a consequence, Samuel Tweah became the biggest victim in this power play between two billionaires, each of whom aims to undo and outmaneuver the other. This is fundamentally unfair to me and requires correction by U.S. authorities. A few months prior to the 2023 elections, the IMCC paid a visit to the port of Buchanan. Prior to this visit, we had taken the position to press ArcelorMittal harder to share the current facilities at the port of Buchanan with HPX to accept small shipments about 1 to 2 metric tons of ore through Guinea, preferably from HPX. Since under the current concession, Mittal is obliged to sharing both rail and port. I narrated all of these positionings and repositionings to the Americans to prove that neither I nor other members of the government of Liberia were biased toward one investor against the other, but that we were bent on finding a practical solution to a very complex problem. Given legal concession rights ArcelorMittal has under the current concession, forcing them out of operations of the rail would require litigation through courts or the armed forces of Liberia bursting through their premises, violating international law. Since the government did not prefer any of these two options, we only could concede to Mittal's operations in exchange for other rights for third-party companies like HPX. However, these explanations still evidently did not impress some higher-ups in Washington, who have continued to use Africa Intelligence, a propaganda media outfit, to rain attacks against the government.